Kal Halalyam La Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Wahabrachakwadash. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders of GMS who rule well, who I learned this truth from, and salutations and blessings to you elect out there. So this is Isaiah 32:9. Rise up, ye women that are at ease. Hear my voice, ye careless daughters. Give ear unto my speech. Many days and years shall ye be troubled, ye careless women, for the vintage shall fail, the gathering shall not come. And pretty much I'm going to go into a little bit more about what does that mean, the vintage shall fail, right? A vintage literally is speaking about the production of wine, right? Stomping on grapes and pressing grapes and creating wine of high quality. Okay, now let's get the definition just to back it up. The year or place in which wine, especially wine of high quality, was produced, right? The time that something of quality was produced, relating to or denoting wine of high quality, denoting something of high quality, especially something from the past or characteristic of the best period of a person's work. And we always speak about you women, liberal women, feminists, right? You modern women, right? What they call 304s, right? That you're going to be in a world of pain because you're pretty much living carelessly. You are completely bugged out. You gargoyles. You guys, your attitude, your values, your morals, your demeanor, your etiquette, which you don't have 1 ounce of, right? You are completely bugged the fuck out, man. Okay? So let me actually go into it a bit more. I asked chat, right, on the vintage. So vintage stems from Old French vendange, grape harvest. Over time it evolved to mean the best of a period, not just wine. By the 15th and 16th century, English writers used vintage figuratively. The vintage of youth, the vintage of valor, meaning the finest or most fruitful season of life. And guess what, you women, modern women, and we're not speaking about all you women, but the majority of women have adopted this lifestyle of Babylon. Okay, have been sipping the wine of Babylon, and you have become mad, crazy, right? You're on OF, making more money than professors, top sportsmen, entertainers, right? And we understand that there's a balance because supply and demand. A lot of you bugged out boys, right, are creating this demand for this nonsense content, right? And you're giving yourself unto lust. And these women are on OF and all these different platforms on Instagram, just thirst trapping, just bugged the fuck out, man. Just completely fucking bugged out. You are in your best time, but guess what? The scripture says the vintage shall fail, man. And we're in it. We're not approaching it, right? We used to say that we're approaching it. We're in it. We're in the time of Jacob's trouble. We're really in Jacob's trouble already. We just entered that door. You see what's happening in Chicago, what happened in LA. It's just going to keep getting worse as we proceed to the closing of the year. And then in the new year, the Most High opens up with a big bang. And 26 is not looking sturdy. Okay? It's looking very, very more confusion, bugged out people losing it, hurt people, people feeling it economically, right? In the UK, just a couple of years ago, you had a thing called in the winter heat or eat, right? You either had money to heat your home or buy groceries, but you couldn't do both. And the time that's coming is going to be tenfold worse than that, right? So it says, meaning the finest or most fruitful season of life, literary proof. Shakespeare's Othello. Well, the first one, it's the first quote. Salaki, he is in the vintage of his strength. 17th century idiom. Shakespeare Othello. An old black ram is tupping your white ewe. Same vintage, imaginary used in moral ripeness or decay. Milton, Paradise Lost. When time hath sown and reaped the vintage of the earth. Vintage is culmination, harvest, and peak. Right? Now, let me see. Let's go here. Vintage marks the completion or peak of the season. Guess what? We're in the peak of Babylon. Babylon already peaked. Right? Babylon already peaked. If you want to be technical, Babylon peaked after the Second World War, right? We were just going into that earlier in the live lesson for the Feast of Tabernacle. Babylon peaked right after 45. You had the 50s and the early 60s, which that was the Leave It to Beaver era. You know, Esau with his white picket fence with his woman, buying a house for $10,000, you know, having the 2-3 children. Okay, the Bible, being in school, you know, all these different things for Esau. Even though we know Esau, how you get down underneath it all. You're a damn freak anyway, you know. But that image of America and that state of America, really, if you want to be technical, okay, there was no mass crime in the cities, there was no mass drugs in the cities, okay. You know, you have problems like every other nation, but I'm talking about the peak of America, the decadence. And then guess what? Right at the end of the 60s, 69 specifically, 70, 71, 1971, America came off the gold standard. Nixon took off the completely the dollar off the American dollar off the gold standard. Okay, you had cultural revolutions which messed up cities. You had the Vietnam War and the people coming back with drugs. You had MK Ultra. You had psychedelics. Okay, you had mass crime starting to hit inner cities. Okay, you had people rebelling against pretty much the scriptures, the Bible. You know, Christianity. You know, I'm talking about Edomites, everybody. Right? When you look into it, right after, even after the Second World War, right? You had these biker gangs start to set themselves up in that rebellious mindset. But really, as I said, 1969, which was they claimed they went to the moon, which we know they didn't. As the scripture says, when thou shalt, let me actually get that real quick. When thou shalt say, not when thou shalt say, but exalt thyself. Okay, these are all prophecies, man. This is the time we're in. We're living these things. It says, Obadiah verse 4, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord Yahweh. So the beginning of this man's ending, okay, when he hit his peak and he started to slope, was around 60s, late 60s to early 70s, and we've been on a downward slope ever since. Okay, to the point where we are now. Mass confusion. You know, it says cultural and idiomatic continuity. Phrases like vintage Sinatra, vintage Porsche, or a vintage year all mean the best era or height of excellence. The shift from aged wine, excellent period, peak of life, shows unbroken metaphorical lineage from agricultural to human greatness. Philosophical precept. The Stoics, especially Marcus Aurelius, who was a Jake, by the way, view each phase of life as a harvest. Each thing ripens in due season. And this is the Most High. Yahweh Shem Yahushai. They're very poetic, man. You see, this is how the Most High speaks in parables. It said the Taoists speak similarly of the full vessel spilling itself. A truth parallel to vintage shall fail. Fullness precedes decline. Okay, just like I said, decadence. Decadence means over luxuriousness, but decadence really means a degrading, going downwards, pretty much. Okay, And that's the time we're in, man. We're in the time of the end now, right? If you want to be technical, the end days started during John the Baptist times. But, um, you know, that beautiful moment when America started to go down. Okay, fast forward a few decades, we're here now, man. This is it. This is it. You know, so be cheerful, man. Be glad, Akyam and Akwathiam. You know, you brothers and sisters, be glad, man. We're here. Pray to the Most High. Keep His commandments, man. Be brotherly. You know, have and build faith. Okay. Anyway, Kahalaliyam la Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Shalom to the elect.